Welcome to Grownish Woman. I'm your host, Holly Teagarden. This is the podcast for women who are in the messy middle of midlife. Your kids are growing up, your hormones are doing whatever they want, and that quiet little voice is asking, okay, well, what do I want to be when I grow up? And it's getting louder by the day. We talk about the stuff everybody is going through, but nobody wants to talk about. We laugh at the chaos, we sit in the hard parts, and we do it all without judgment because midlife does not come with a manual, but it does come with this podcast. Welcome back to Grownish Woman. I'm Holly, and today we're talking about something so many of us are living through right now, but rarely talk about, and that is aging parents. I first want to start with something personal. A few years back, my dad passed away suddenly, and the truth is, we really didn't have the conversation we needed to have. There was no trust set up, none of the planning that makes those moments even a little bit easier. My mom ended up moving in with us, and almost overnight, I was raising my daughter and caring for my mother at the same time. If this sounds familiar to you, you're not imagining how hard it is. You're living in the sandwich generation and you're far from being alone. There's actually roughly 53 million family caregivers in the US right now, and 60% of them report burnout. 30% are caring for both kids and aging parents simultaneously. And it's usually women in their 40s and 50s carrying that load. It's not just the physical work either. Oh, honey, no. It's the emotional and logistical overload that really wears you down. This is actually a topic we're going to keep coming back to on the show because I feel like so many of us are in this messy middle and it just deserves more than one conversation. Today, I'm joined by Joy, who has spent 17 years in the healthcare industry and has led one of the top providers of in home senior care and companion care. Joy has seen it all. The families who catch warning signs early, the ones who get blindsided like mine did. We're going to talk about how to tell when your parent actually needs help, why adult children so often miss the signs, and what to ask before you ever hire in home support. We're also going to get into the difference between medical care and in home care, the financial surprises that catch families off guard, and what happens when a parent refuses, but you know they need it, and why that can create real tension between siblings. Toward the end, we'll talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough: end of life care, the paperwork that follows a death, and why rest might be the most important form of self care there is. If you've been carrying this quietly, this conversation is for you. Let's get into it. Joy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's a hard conversation and so many of us are going through. So
Mhm.
having, somebody who's in the trenches definitely helps.
Yeah, absolutely. In the trenches and seeing both sides of the story for quite
Yes.
some time. Yeah,
Yes. One of the stats that I thought was insane was roughly one in every four adults are a caregiver.
absolutely. Yeah.
Oh,
I think we're looking at 53 million family caregivers in our country. And
wow.
60% of those caregivers are reporting that they're burnt out. So, that is a crisis if I've
Yeah.
ever heard one. And then if you
Whoa.
look at 30% of that 53 million is taking care of both their children and their parents.
The whole sandwich generation thing.
We are the sandwich generation. Yes, we are. And then 60% of us work outside the home. So we are like juggling careers and kids. And then you kind of have this unexpected thing that nobody talks about, this secret everybody keeps, this invisible workforce that is the family caregiver. Um,
Right. And I think most of the times, I don't want to generalize, it does fall on the women of the family. And you know, I was one of them up until recently. Why are we so unprepared when it comes to caring for our aging parents? Why do you think?
because we're
We're
used to
busy.
them caring for us.
Yes, that's true.
It is a big shift. I think it's a twofold answer. It's one, anytime that you are seeing someone you love struggle. It's painful, it's complicated. And when it's our parents, we're not all families are transparent, not all families have the difficult
Oh,
conversations, and it can be really hard for us to see what's actually going on when it's our parents. And I think sometimes an outside perspective is needed. Sometimes, um, you have to really look at yourself and you need to ask yourself, is this affecting my relationship with my parents? Like, is this something that, what am I guess you have to kind of be introspective and say, like, what is it about my relationship with my parents right now that feels off? And then you have to start asking some other questions. But I do think the reason why it is so hard for us to see is number 1, because we're used to them being the caregiver. And number 2, because we are in this phase of life where we are busy. If you're in your 40s, 50s, even 60s, you've got kids that you're still helping all the time. You're
right,
helping them with huge transitions, right? And then
right.
you've got a career, and you're usually at that time, you're in a very busy, exciting time in your career. And you just aren't able to stop and look and think, "Okay, something is different here." And we're just so busy, we just don't see it sometimes until we're like, "Why are we so worn out? Why are we so burnt out? What's changed?" And you gotta ask yourself those tough questions. Yeah.
That is true. I think, to add to what you're saying is we lose ourselves being a parent sometimes.
Mm.
And now we're having to be a caregiver. And I'm thinking, who's taking care of us? Who's filling our cup?
I do think there is a new responsibility on our shoulders as women, as caregivers for our kids and for maybe other family members, for our parents, to take care of ourselves. I think, a decade ago, it was all about self care. And then, when we went through the pandemic, it was all about self care. Self care to me doesn't even begin to explain
Yeah.
what we need to be doing on a regular basis as women
Right.
in this age group to take care of
Oof.
ourselves. There's actually a general rule, out there in this industry, in home care industry that, states if you are in your 40s or older and you have parents near their 70s, that you should be having this conversation with them, tough conversations with them, whether you feel like they need help or not. You should have
Wow.
it.
Wow. I know for myself, I was raised by like very independent mom. And when my dad died, she'd move in with us after she sold her home. But for the people who don't have their parent living with them, like, at what point do you think, like, you know what, you might need somebody to come in and help beyond parents who are independent? Like, I have everything, I got it handled.
Yeah. I think, again, that is a reflection. You have to kinda look at yourself, and then you also have to look at your parents, and you have to look at the quality of life, and you have to look at the quality of your relationship. So, I always said as someone in the in-home care industry that the greatest gift you can give is to allow a family to have the opportunity to just be a daughter and a mom again, or a dad and a son again. And it's if you, as the child, are spending more time doing laundry, scrubbing up whatever episode happened on the chair when the Depends gave out, taking them to doctor's appointments, all those things. If that has become the bulk of your relationship with your parents, and you don't get to sit and do puzzles anymore, you don't get to bake with the kids anymore, you don't get to go take her to a movie or go to dinner or get pedicures or, have tea, whatever it is that was your time with your parent, if that is gone and you're spending your time doing all those other things, then it is past time to get some help because you can't go back and change that dynamic. You can't go back and get those moments back as a daughter and not a caregiver. So, and not to say that, still isn't beauty in, being able to take care of a loved one. I had a final day with my nana and I got to take care of her and I did. Bathed her, put her in her pajamas and tucked her in for bed. And that was a very special day for me. And I am very grateful I had that. but it was an exception. I was able to have a lot of time with her as her granddaughter, and not as her caregiver. So I think once you reach that phase where that's where you're spending the bulk of your time, or that's where your brain is going, you're even thinking about getting over there or what they're doing, then it's time. It's definitely time. And then you look at their quality of life too,
Right.
and you say,
True.
are they getting out as much as they should, or are they limited in what they can do by my schedule? Are they depressed? Are they having the interactions they want to have? If they can't drive anymore and my schedule's full with 4 kids and a career, then how is that affecting their quality of life? All those things are equally important.
All right. So when I think about outside care, I guess for me, I think of movies where you have a nurse coming in and she's kind of mean. And I know that's not the case. I mean, we didn't have anybody come in, but I know that things look a lot different than what they're portraying it on the movies.
Mhm. I think this is, like, one of the questions I get the most. What is the difference between these people who I can bring in my house? You know what I mean? Like, what is the difference between medical help at home? So that would be like a nurse filling pill boxes,
Right.
taking blood pressure, hospice, which is, typically end of life care. And a lot of times people feel like that's going to give them a lot of support, but actually it's usually only, maybe once a week, maybe twice a week check ins and bathing. Those two things are covered by health insurance. Right? In-home care is what fills in all the holes. It's the transportation, the companionship, the laundry, the bathing, the med management, reminding them to take their medications. It's all those things it is not covered by health insurance. So I think that's an important distinction to make right up front, because then what you find out is, okay, I'm in charge of figuring this out. I'm in charge of finding who should take care of my parent, and I'm in charge of figuring out how we're paying for this. Unless you have long-term care insurance or something along those lines, but that's an exception as well. So,
Yeah, I guess, and to think about it, I mean, families could get blindsided by the financial implications.
yeah, absolutely, and there are also, like, many families right now that are blindsided by the fact that they put their loved one in a facility thinking that that was gonna meet everybody's needs, and because the facilities are so understaffed, they're now paying for an in-home care company on top of the facility costs. So it is a extremely huge investment that I think a lot of families did not expect. Going back to your question about who's coming in the house, I think when you're shopping around for these in-home care companies, people ask what is the most important thing to ask, and this might shock everybody, but my question would be, how do you treat your caregivers? What are they paid? Are they
Mm.
your employee or are they contracted out? Did you hire them? Did you train them? What do you do to keep them happy? What do you do to keep them from being burnout? That's the difference. That's what makes a difference between an agency where you have a kind, loving, well
Right.
cared for, confident, trained, fun caregiver, and one that shows up so burnout that they can't be that for your loved one. Just like you
Right.
can, you know? Yeah,
Okay. What happens, or I guess, have you ever seen where a parent refuses help, but the child knows they need it?
absolutely. All the time.
Really?
Yes,
Oh
that's the
my gosh,
number.
what trauma.
It's awful. It causes, a huge argument, and then you go into all these family dynamics where one sibling thinks they do need help, one doesn't, one wants to spend the money, the other one doesn't think it's necessary, you I there's a lot of complicated family dynamics that happen at the beginning, which is a number one way to avoid that is, again, to have that conversation early. To have it before it's a crisis, to have it before it's, whatever else, is going on. So,
You mean
that's the
like
first.
sitting down as a family, Joy, and like all, okay,
Yep.
mom or dad, this is what you want. This is what we can afford, or I guess
Yeah.
the nuts and
What
bolts.
Yeah, get to the nitty-gritty. How much money is there? What do you want? Do you want to stay home? Do you want to go into a facility? What's important to you? And then that gives you guys the opportunity as the children to go and price out those options and then come back to your parents and say, this is what that looks like. Are you comfortable with that? Really just having those in-depth, nitty-gritty, open, transparent conversations, because if you do not, you could be left in a situation where your parent might not be able to communicate to you what they need or want, and you're stuck with that decision and you don't know what resources you have. And that's the scariest scenario.
Okay. One of the things I want to bring up is the family dynamics because I feel this is the topic where, there could be siblings who don't speak to each other again. I mean, it's
Mhm.
just that I hate to be dramatic, but I feel like it could be that detrimental to the family dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely it could. And, again, I think that comes with having those conversations early. Who is comfortable helping physically care, like, who's okay with giving mom a bath? If that's what your family has decided they wanna do, who's okay with
Yeah.
that piece? And if you're not okay with that piece, great. Thank you for being honest. Are you okay with the financial piece? Are you okay with figuring out groceries? Are you know what I mean? Like, each person
True.
needs to spend some time reflecting and saying, "What am I okay with? What am I capable of in this situation?" And being really honest about it because and you can change your mind at any minute, nothing is permanent. That's the other piece of it, right? Like you thought you could do this and you can't. So, you gotta be honest with each other.
I recently saw their death doulas now.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, and just it kind of blew me away. I mean, there's birth doulas and now there's death doulas. We all don't know what that end looks like, right? Like, how do we navigate when the parent is really close to the end?
And that is almost like what you do is you take that conversation we're having and you put it under a microscope and it becomes a magnifying glass actually and it just becomes bigger and more important. Everything is
Yeah.
bigger, more important. All the emotions are typically bigger. And I think that if that's something that you are looking to have outside support with, that's also an important question to ask your agency that you're going to work with. I can say on my team, I had 5 women that
Yep.
I knew had that extra gift to be
Mhm.
present for that family at the end of life in any way they need it. I think, sometimes family needs someone who's more spiritual. Sometimes they need someone who's more religious and biblical. And, it's a series of things that you look at as an agency to make sure that it's a good match to provide the family with the support they need at the end. But, sometimes what I do recommend is sleep. Like,
Yeah.
at that point, you don't wanna
Oh,
step away, but if you don't sleep, you can't be fully present for your loved
that's
one in those end of life moments, so,
that's
yeah.
true.
So, even just having somebody overnight so you can sleep. Yeah.
That's no, you're right.
Mhm.
Having somebody overnight, almost like when first have a baby and they have those women who tend to your child at night. Like when you need the rest, having somebody there that can help you.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that really caught me off guard when my dad died was the amount of paperwork. What would I call it? Like the office part of death.
Yeah,
I
administrative duties. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I don't no one prepares you for the level of paperwork that is needed for this.
And it's endless, and there's so
Endless.
many people that have contact with your parents now. I mean, my nana passed away, oh my goodness, probably 5 years ago. My mother still gets calls
Yeah.
for her. You know, it's but yes, the administrative stuff, there are, elder care attorneys that can help with that. There are, geriatric specialists that can help
Okay.
with that. I'm hoping in other states, geriatric specialists are much more common and popular, and I'm seeing some growth here in Pennsylvania, so I'm hoping that that's gonna become, a bigger trend here as well, but those are people that can really sometimes they have a degree in a health science, sometimes they're actual gerontologists, but they can really provide support to the family and answer all those questions while they're in it because each scenario is so very different. Are we talking about a long hospital stay that led to them passing away? Were they home?
Right.
Did they have a trust? It's just
Right.
there's so many different things to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, the trust thing, I didn't know anything about that until my dad's passing, but I think that's another thing that's really important just to in terms of like not having to go to probate court
Yeah,
and somebody else to take your parents' money.
yeah.
But the trust thing, yeah, that's huge.
It
That is
is.
huge.
Yeah. It's a whole
Where
different thing you don't think about.
there is no handbook for this, and I know everybody's story is different, but there really is nobody talking about all of this. And I just don't think we're emotionally prepared as moms specifically to handle, like you said, raising our parents as we're raising our kids. It's just the weight is too high. Okay, that is a wrap on today's episode of Grownish Woman. And honestly, I could have kept going. If something you heard today made you laugh, made you cry, or maybe made you text your best friend and say you have to listen to this, that's exactly why I created it. Do me a favor. If you're loving the show, please subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts and leave a review. It takes like 2 minutes and it really means the world to me. It also helps other women in the messy middle find us. And trust me, they need the community just as much as we do. Come find me on Instagram, Grownish Woman Podcast, and keep the conversation going because what we talk about here doesn't need to stop when the episode ends.